Welcome to St. Francis TV. My name is Pat Kowite, and as one of the founders of this parish, I would love to share some of my memories with you. So, I was here back in 1982, back when this parish didn't exist. And we were just beginning to want a place to gather as a faith community. So let's go back to those days. Back in 1982, and right after that, there was a lot going on, but there weren't a lot of spaces. Oh my goodness, we didn't have a church. At the beginning of St. Francis, we started out meeting at Lynn Road Public School. And that in itself was a feat because back in 1982, Raleigh was not the same place that it is now. There were a lot of misconceptions about Catholics. There were people here who had never, at least knowingly, met a Catholic. And they really thought that with all of the Catholics moving to the Research Triangle Park, we were out to convert every one of them. And we weren't. But it was very hard for us to find space to meet, to celebrate our faith. But because of two other founders, Jim and Mary Lynn Cause, who had a child at Lynn Road Elementary School and a little bit of pull, we were allowed to have our liturgies there. We started in the library, but very quickly we outgrew the library and moved to the gym. And that's where I remember hearing Father English, Jim English, talk to us about building this new church and how everybody had to be a part of it. So it was in that gymnasium with Jim English as our pastor, a Jesuit, by the way, that he started talking about his vision for our parish. And we all loved the idea of it. We quickly outgrew even the gymnasium at Lynn Road School, and we broke all kinds of history in Raleigh when Jim English forged a wonderful relationship with the pastor of Leesville Road Baptist Church down the street. And we actually celebrated liturgies in the Baptist church. Heaven knows what their members thought about us, but it was a wonderful ecumenical movement for our young parish. Then we started having liturgies also in Father English's backyard. The picnic table was the altar. We all brought blankets to sit on or lawn chairs to sit on, and if it rained, everybody grabbed something and rushed to his living room. And that's where we had liturgies in the winter when the weather was cold. I remember sitting in a chair. I was often a lector at that liturgy. I loved that liturgy. But my feet wouldn't reach the floor. So I had to sit up in my chair, kind of like I'm doing with this chair, because I'm a pretty short person. But the thing I want to tell you is, once we did build our church, we didn't have a lot of space. We had that sanctuary, we had a small office, and we had one meeting room. And that was a very small meeting room. So if you go to the back of our property where the original church was, you will see that outside there is a water fountain, and there are some benches. That was the hub of where we had activities. And there's a covered walkway, so if it rained, we could still have gatherings outside. I remember when I was the director of faith formation that I had to plan on what if it rains, and we had to set up cake and celebration for the children under those roofings so that we would have a space. But also, in our original church, we didn't have pews because we needed chairs to be able to be moved over to the sides. So I remember, oh my gosh, do I remember, we had parties in there, we had receptions in there. I remember teaching a CPR class there for first aid. And I remember faith formation sessions for children and RCIA sessions for adults. the church itself became not just our place for worship, but our place for gathering. And it was an important part of our lives. So let me give you a little show and tell. All right, so first, this right here. This is what our church looked like at the beginning. There was a circular drive, and you could drop people off at the front door. Usually, people would park along the side when you went into the main entrance, and you would come in any door you wanted. But isn't that lovely? It was in the woods. Now, the other thing I want to show you is this little plate here. We are right now celebrating the 40th anniversary of our parish. These plates were made for any parishioners who wanted one at the 5th anniversary of our parish. And on the back, it tells you a little bit about the history of our parish, the consecration, and the first liturgy that was out in the woods. And we processed from Father English's living room. That house was across the street from Leesville Road, little house, but we processed across Leesville Road over to the woods where they were getting ready to clear some trees to build our church. So now that leads me to one of the most wonderful stories of our parish. Someone once asked me, how did we come to be named St. Francis of Assisi Parish? Well, oh my goodness, let me tell you about that. Father English, as I mentioned, was a Jesuit. So he was kind of partial to a Saint Ignatius that was a patron for the Jesuits. But he also had a very good friend, Bob Hudak, who was a Franciscan friar and who often came down here to visit. So he had decided that he would either name the parish St. Ignatius of Loyola or St. Francis of Assisi Parish. Well, on the day that we were going to be clearing the woods, we started with a procession at Father English's house across the street. And we came across in procession to this wooded space that would soon be cleared. But he told the saints ahead of time. He talked to God and to St. Ignatius and to St. Francis, and he said, I need a sunny day for my Mass. So here's what I'm going to tell you. St. Francis, you love nature. So if you give me a bright sunny day, I will name my parish after you. But St. Ignatius, if it is a rainy day, I will be naming our parish after you. Well, we woke up on that morning to a bright, sunny day, and here we are, the Catholic community of St. Francis of Assisi. Isn't that a great story? So I have to tell you another wonderful story about our parish. I am asked sometimes, what are some of your favorite stories? And this is one of them. Father English was an incredible homilist. He told fantastic homilies, as have some of our other friars. But there is one in particular that I remember so well from Father English. But I have to back up a little and tell you the history of Father English. He came here from Washington, D.C., where he was a pastor at a different parish. And he hobnobbed with a lot of the Washington elites, and he was actually very good friends with the Kennedys. So now you can understand why we would have believed this homily, where he had everybody totally convinced that the Queen of England was coming to visit St. Francis of Assisi Parish. Isn't that crazy? How could we have believed such a silly thing? But number one, he was a very good homilist. And number two, he knew those Kennedys, so it's like, okay, maybe he pulled strings and the Queen of England's coming here. So he had us convinced that we need to create all kinds of committees to prepare for the Queen of England. We needed the decoration committee, the welcoming committee, who would be in charge of all of the formalities when a queen comes to visit your parish. And it went on and on and on. And we were slowly a little skeptical, but he won us over, and we were so excited about the Queen of England coming to Raleigh, to our parish, our little bitty parish. Well, then he told us, well, no, she's not really coming. Now, you may be wondering, what in the world has that got to do with preaching the gospel? And here's the thing. Here's the great part of this story. He said to us, can you see how much we're doing to prepare for the Queen of England? How much do you prepare for Christ coming into your life? Whoa, you could have heard a pin drop in our church. My goodness, what are we doing to prepare for Christ? Isn't that great? I just love that story, and I had to share that with you. But let's move on. Let me tell you about my days working here. I was at first a volunteer, and then I was hired here. First, I was the director for faith formation. I did that for a number of years. I thought I was resigning totally. But what I ended up doing was moving over to a new position where I worked with our original parish administrator, Judy Scheel. Judy was a great person. And like everybody else, she loved our parish and wanted to do all she could for our parish. Well, Judy, as many people in those days, it's hard to believe now, but in those days, a lot of people were not terribly familiar with computers. A lot of people didn't have computers yet. Isn't that crazy? But we didn't. Judy had a computer, but she didn't totally trust that computer. Not with our important stuff for our parish. So let me show you how Judy originally kept track of the parishioners at St. Francis. Here, can you see these? We had cards in a little card file, and every time she would register someone, we would have the number of people, the running total of families in the parish, we would have the date, and we would have the name. Now, I don't know if we can zoom in, but you can see here that there are little pluses and maybe a minus or two. A plus meant that it was a family that's being added to the parish, and a minus meant that it's a family that has moved somewhere else out of town. So she kept little index cards in her little card file until we got to the point that we needed a different system. So then we moved on to the log books. It was after we had just about finished this first log book. Oh no, there's my handwriting. But this is what we moved to. So we kept track, a running total of how many families we had in our parish. And we moved on to this log book. And a number of people kept these. But that was part of my job when I first started working with Judy. And I look back at these now. When we were cleaning files a number of years ago, long time ago, this was almost thrown away, and I thought, oh, no, no, no. This is too precious. We need to save these because it's part of our beginnings, our founding. So I had to share that with you. So after we had our Father English, our Jesuit, then came the Franciscan friars. And oh my goodness, did they change things for us. We were still the very welcoming community that we always were. We still loved the laity doing all they could for this parish. That was important. What he added, which wasn't, it was there, but it wasn't emphasized quite as much, was peace and justice. Our sharing all that we have, all that we are with our brothers and sisters. Whether it would be the marginalized, whether it would be those who we don't know that we welcome into our community, didn't matter. We were brothers and sisters to all. And that was the emphasis that David brought to us. David McBriar, our first Franciscan friar. I told you that Father English was an incredible homilist. David was too. He was so incredible with his homilies, to the point that, again, when I was working in the office with Judy Shield, and later on she left and I took over that position, we had an incredible number of people asking for copies of David's homilies because they meant so much. So here's the next thing that I'm going to show and tell you about. We actually created books of David's homilies. The first one, just an old book, and then Forget Something, and Love in a Paper Sack. You can't buy these anymore, but they have so many of his absolutely wonderful, wonderful homilies. He tells us now that they aren't relevant anymore because a lot of them are based on news stories at the time. Don't you believe it for a minute. You will love these, and they are in our library at St. Francis. So if you ever want to pick one up and read through it, I promise you, you're going to love it. The other book that we published way back in our early days is this one. An entirely different book, but oh my goodness, what fun. This one is Feeding the Flock. And one of the other founders, Judy Barton, was in charge. And she created, she created the book, but we got favorite recipes from all the parishioners and the friars. And everybody loved this, and I still use mine. I don't know if this is still in the library, but if it's not, you got to try to snag a copy. So, those are a lot of the stories of our founding. But I want to move up just a little bit, if you will allow me to do that. I have been asked sometimes, what would be a story that you would tell or an advice that you would give to the current day members of our parish, our other brothers and sisters in our family of faith? So what I want to tell you is this. There are founders way back from 1982 and 83 and 84. But you know what? They're not the only founders, because our parish is constantly being refounded. We had that little church that was built to look like a barn with woods from raised buildings from the Northeast. It was a wonderful faith community, but that's not who we are now. We've changed, and we keep on changing. That's part of who we are. So that's part of the journey of our faith. So I would like to also tell you a little bit about the building of our second sanctuary, the church that we use now. And this is just a little bitty touch of this, of the flavor of what it was like. Because that too was exciting. It was a big time in our parish where we moved from having a little church for 450 people, where we were so crowded that people stood outside around that water fountain for Mass with speakers so they could hear. We were moving from that to a new sanctuary that would hold 1,250 people. Oh my goodness, what a big change that was for us. But it was exciting. And we changed a lot. We kept some too, like the statues here. But let me tell you about a couple of things that I just love. This looks like just a little slab of granite, doesn't it? But let me tell you what this is. When we were building this, we had a liturgical design consultant named Frank Kismarzik. And Frank knew that he wanted to use granite in several different places. You will see it at our baptismal font, you will see it at our altar, and you will see it in the presider's bench and the ambo, the lectern. But there were different surfaces of granite, different ways to finish it. And you will see that if you go up to the altar area. But he wanted to give us a flavor of that. So this is the polished granite. This was a sample that he brought. Now, I absolutely love that little sample, and I used to have this sitting on my desk where I would have my coffee cup and maybe my snack with it. But when I retired a number of years ago, I took my granite with me because I love it so much. But go up and look at the granite, because I bet you've never noticed or appreciated the different surfaces of granite. This is the other thing. Have you got any idea what this thing is? Oh, I love this one. And I'm going to turn it around for you. It's a little bit heavy. It's a big concrete block. There you go. Can you see this design here? It looks like it was scratched in with a penknife or something, doesn't it? Well, let me tell you what this is. In our church, if you go to the front, there are 4 big columns that kind of form the altar area. And on those are candles. Those are called the dedication candles. And when a new church is dedicated and consecrated, the pastor or the bishop or whoever will go up with chrism and they will bless those candles. So we needed to put those, we wanted to make those dedication candles very special. If you will go and look at those 4 columns, you will see that underneath there is a little area that is projected outwards that has a cross. Just like with the granite, we had to test it out and see what it would be like. How deep did we need to make the cross that would be etched into that? And this was one of our sample ones. This was the beginnings of, is this too deep or too shallow? It turns out this was too deep. But after the church was built, a number of years, 10 years later, I was walking outside in our memorial garden one day, and I noticed a chunk of concrete under one of the benches. I went to look, and I found a number of these. And I thought, oh my gosh, I know exactly what that is. So there are a couple of them here at the parish. This one sits in my garden. And sometimes people might think I have someone buried in my garden because it looks a little bit like a gravestone, but it's very special to me. So these are just a few of the stories, just a few, that give you a little taste of what our parish was like. At the beginning, and maybe help you think about who we will become. Because that's the thing. We are always being refounded. And you sitting there watching this, you're an important part of that. Just like at the beginning, we have to decide who we are as a faith community. You have to decide. We want you. Thank you. I may come back sometime. Until then, thank you for your time.